Hello and welcome to the Swinging Christies, the Christie Time podcast about Agatha Christie in the swinging 60s. I'm Dr. Mark Aldridge, I'm an associate professor, and I've written a lot about Agatha Christie, including my brand new book, Agatha Christie's Marple Expert on Wickedness, which is still out now.
Yes, and I'm Gray Robert Brown, I'm a writer, and I pledge allegiance to the good cause of Agatha Christie. Mrs. Christie's gone to Washington.
Mrs. Christie.
Dr. Aldridge has gone with her,
Yes.
and Mr. Brown has gone with her as well. We are in Washington, D.C.
We are in Washington, D.C.
It's so exciting.
Yes.
I've never been. You've been twice.
I've been twice, for research both times. Yes.
And we're actually sat outside one of the buildings at the Library of Congress.
Yeah, well, we're between the two main ones, actually, really, aren't we?
Yes, true.
Yeah.
So part one of our American Odyssey, if that's not too grand a term. No.
It might slightly be.
I don't think
know if
it
2
is.
stops makes an Odyssey.
I don't think it is. I think it's the Route 66 that we've done, aka the Amtrak between New York and DC. Yeah, so part one of our American Odyssey, I'm going to go there again, was from New York City. That's in your podcast feeds now, dear listener. And this is part 2, Washington, D.C.
It is. We've got lots to explore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, very exciting.
Get started.
Let's. So here we are.
Yes.
Down the mall.
There.
Mall.
I was just thinking, is mall or mall? 'Cause it's... Oh dear. We're getting lots of other people's photos. But I mean, you're doing that whether you are.
But then they're getting in our podcast.
That's
so,
really true. Yeah, I'm talking about that.
So yeah, we're just sort of traversing the mall in Washington DC, which runs from the Capitol all the way down
all the way down to the Lincoln Memorial.
Yes, with a sojourn around the Washington Memorial in the middle as well. We're just passing the fountain. That's probably what you can hear in the background.
Passing the memorial,
and then it's the reflection pool. Beyond,
yes,
did you
that's
say?
it. Yes.
Yeah, it's all very beautiful. It's a lovely sunny day. So why have you brought us to DC, Mark? Why was Dr. Mark Aldridge? Why was DC on the itinerary?
So a couple of reasons. Firstly, I like DC.
Well, that helps.
That helps. Obviously there's the big political centre, but that's not really the reason. The reason is that the Library of Congress is here. So for another project, but also us, I wanted to look at some magazines that aren't at the British Library, some American magazine publications of Agatha Christie stories. So we've made sure we've looked at some 1960s ones, or all the ones that we could.
Yep.
And also, because we're so big on context, I was like, if we're going to go to the East Coast of America, we really should go to some of the big museums to sort of, like the American history of America. Like, because obviously we're British. And so I really wanted...
Are we?
Well, as our service said last night, they're
They're
British.
just so British.
She didn't realise I was hearing her as she walked on and said to her colleague.
And then she thought you were going to run without paying.
Then she did. Literally, as I left the restroom, she was stood outside waiting for me to pay. So clearly suspicious of the Brits. Maybe rightly so. I don't know.
Oh, right, quite possibly. But yeah, you're right, because the great thing about seeing the magazines in which Agatha Christie stories appeared, as they did throughout the 1960s, is, as you pointed out, the historical, socio-political, cultural context is all around those stories, and we're really interested in kind of just sort of verifying it from an actual American perspective, but also going back to the original sources, the primary sources, which obviously we're big on. And so we went to the Smithsonian Museum of
American history.
We may or may not have gone in the wrong one initially.
Yes.
The Natural History Museum.
Yeah, we were like, we're here to see dinosaurs. I don't think we're here to see dinosaurs.
That wasn't quite what we were intending.
No.
But yeah, they've got a few lovely 60s exhibits, which all kind of reinforced our perception of America in the period, I think.
Yes.
The first one that I saw being, and I'll post a picture of this on our socials, but is it Mary Wilson? Mary Wilson from the Supremes.
From the Supremes.
Her gown.
Yes, her gown, yeah.
Not Diana Ross's gown, but Mary Wilson. I actually rang in advance and said, please don't exhibit anything from Diana Ross because Mark will never let me live it down. So when I hear you, they were like, I hear you, we're going to swap it out for a Mary Wilson gown instead. Beautiful.
Although they did play Stop in the Name of Love in the
They did.
shop.
They did. Beautiful, yellow gown. And next to that was an exhibit about counterculture.
Yes.
I think it bears repeating that a lot of the time when we talk about things like the Summer of Love, and LSD and the whole kind of countercultural movement that really was being led by America, specifically on the West Coast.
Yeah.
You know, it filtered through to London and to Berlin and many other places, but really the epicenter of that kind of hippie movement in particular was California.
Yeah.
And thirdly, there was a display of costumes from Phyllis Diller's tour of Vietnam, obviously acknowledging the Vietnam War, which sadly ran for a long time into the 70s, but that's a big historical backdrop that Christie is writing with. I think there are definitely grounds to say that some of the turmoil in Passenger to Frankfurt is inspired by the horrors of the Vietnam War.
Definitely.
Passenger to Frankfurt is a standalone espionage thriller about Sir Stafford Nye's hunt for answers from 1970.
Definitely. The whole thing about student protests and stuff that go hand in hand with that.
Yeah.
It's all tied in together.
Definitely.
Yes.
And also, I mean, specifically as well, I remember learning years ago in history lessons that one of the reasons why the horrors of the Vietnam War really hit home was because it was the first televised war. So it was the first war where people would have seen on the news images of what was really happening.
Yes.
And directly, you know, not in the cinema before a film, not with a bit of a remove.
Yeah, time,
newspapers,
because and
or with
also
a delay.
you'd have that with newsreels and stuff. They would be general about the general movement of the war,
Yes.
not about what happened today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to acknowledge that even having said that, it still wouldn't be quite so immediate as it is today.
Yeah.
And also, I think the news, I think it's fair to say, we've both scoured newspapers for research purposes over the years. I think it's fair to say that the emphasis on a globalised perspective and international news has increased since then.
Yeah.
So I think it's also important to take with a pinch of salt just how much Christie would have been aware of American politics, American culture, American history going on. Having said that, as we talked about in part one in New York, she came here. She came here several times.
She did.
And specifically in 1966. She came to DC specifically.
She did, yes.
On that tour. And yeah, there are a few mentions, as we're here, there are a few specific Washington mentions in Passenger to Frankfurt. It's not always apparent which one she's talking about.
No, I think she uses it as a sort of general term for sort of American politics and the American
Yes.
government, doesn't she?
Quite.
Which says Washington.
Yes, you're right. There is talk of in the slightly dystopian, slightly imaginary Fantasia world of Passenger to Frankfurt, there is talk of Washington being razed to the ground and burned out in amongst the chaos, presumably protests. And Washington DC was and remains a major site of demonstrations. As you said, it's the seat of power in this country. It makes sense. And speaking of, we're looking at right now
the steps up to the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah, which is famously the site of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech.
Yes.
Of course, a major figure in the 1960s, and
now, and
of course.
Yes.
And the civil rights movement is a big chapter of 1960s American history. It definitely had influences across the pond, as well. And would absolutely have been something that Christie, as an avid newspaper reader, would have been aware of. Mm-hmm. And there are things like James Baldwin, the African-American author, coming to Cambridge in the 60s and lecturing about civil rights. So even if we're saying, was Christie always fully cognizant of all world politics? Well, it was very much coming to the doorstep in Great Britain as well in this time. But yeah, it's quite amazing to see where he actually stood.
So yes, I think it's time for us to climb the steps actually and go and say hello to President Lincoln ourselves.
Let's do that. And then tomorrow we're off to the Library of Congress to see what we can discover in terms of Agatha Christie's periodicals.
Exciting. Love a library.
The periodicals of Agatha Christie.
Out. Yeah.
So we're back from the Library of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
The Madison Library, was it?
Yes.
Yes.
Madison Building, yes.
Madison Building.
Library is the Madison Building, yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. Loads of interesting things we saw there. Stuff that will influence future episodes, in fact, I think it's fair to say.
Yes.
But in particular, we were looking at Agatha Christie's serializations in American magazines.
Yes, that's it. So this was one of the first things when we were thinking about going to America that I said would be really good, because these aren't all held at the British Library. And as I've said before, lots of these stories would be published in magazines first, and that is actually where you'd make a lot of your money in the short term as an author and an agent. And what I think is really interesting is how overlooked this is now, because this is how a lot of people would have consumed these stories in the 1960s.
Yeah.
So I thought I actually needed copies of some of these for another project, but I thought at the same time, let's have a look at actually how these stories were presented to readers, like what the contexts are, what other articles are in these magazines, what sort of adverts are there. So we're going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour about some of the highlights, because I think some of this we might come back to at other points, and definitely some of it we're going to come back to in our Talkie Talk in September this year.
Tickets still available.
You get a glass of fizz with ours. Honestly, what can you want?
Is it fizz? I thought it was a cocktail. Or either or. Or both?
It is? I don't know. I'm
just propagating fake news now to get people through the door.
Yes, none of this is actually...
I'll give you £25, listener, if you can't see us.
So I thought we'd go through these. So the first one, because we're going to go through them in order, Cat Among the Pigeons then.
Cat Among the Pigeons is a Poirot novel about the murder of a games mistress at a girls' school from 1959.
This is Ladies' Home Journal in November 1959. Cover articles include Can You Keep Your Child from Whining? Pretty Fashions for a Governor's Wife on a Budget. What sort of budget has a governor's wife got? But let's not worry too much about that.
Governor as in like a prison?
No, I think as in a state governor. When Orange Blossoms Fade. Sex and Religion. Tell me, Doctor, when did Labour be in juice? How do Mr. and Mrs. Rockefeller live? Oh my God, Rockefeller.
Yeah.
How much is that coming up? We had to sit through a bit of Rockefeller propaganda in order to go to the top of the Rockefeller building.
Yeah.
To take a nice photo.
Which you did use, and that's the photo on Instagram. Do check it out with Christie_time over there. But they make you we weren't even allowed to sit. You have to stand and watch this film.
Yes.
All about the great millionaire.
I thought we were going to have to salute by the end.
Yeah. It was quite bizarre. Yeah. But I mean, lovely view from the top of his building. I'll give him that.
So it was a condensed version of the story. This is quite common in some of the magazines by this time.
Yeah.
That they didn't serialise it. Couple of nice things about this. Firstly, there's a lovely illustration which we'll post on our social media with little cat eyes and stuff. But also there is a special introduction on the contents page to Agatha Christie. And I'm going to read it all out because I think it's sweet. And it's got a nice little quote from her. So we're told that Agatha Christie is a tall, sophisticated Englishwoman who is so shy she is personally almost as much a mystery as her fictional creations. She is the wife of Max Mallowan, an archaeologist, and usually spends 4 months a year on digging expeditions. She has had 60 novels published in the United States, more than 60 million copies have been sold, and she has written 12 plays, one of which, The Mousetrap, has the longest run in British theatrical history. So funny to hear that from something that's like 65, 6 years old.
There was a note in one of the archives we looked at in New York that said, if The Mousetrap carries on as it is, and it shows no sign of letting up, and it was from like 60 something.
Yes,
and I was like, it would have been the late 60s.
Yeah. But this is one of the big things when Christmas Pudding came out, was that originally Edmund Corker suggested Three Blind Mice, the short story. And Agatha Christie said, well, I know that, whatever it was, 250,000 people have seen it, but that's quite a lot of the world who haven't still seen it. In her first novel, she created Hercule Poirot, the Belgian detective who returns to solve the crimes in Cat Among the Pigeons, which starts on page 66. Her personal report to the journal: I am passionately fond of cooking, interested in interior decorating and anything to do with houses. I collect papier-mâché furniture and take enormous pleasure in flower arranging. I agree with the Chinese that the years between 60 and 70 are some of the best in one's life. What a lovely, upbeat little sort of snapshot of her life.
And like you said, when you discovered it, I think it's amazing that all these years later we're still rediscovering little bits of words from Christie herself.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
we should never take those for granted.
Definitely not. And I found one the other day, as I said to you. A new interview. Ladies' Home Journal then, clearly quite upmarket. you're the governor's wife, but you're on a budget, and things about religion.
Not that market, because those magazines have no budget.
Yeah, and also, can you keep your child from whining? The answer might be give it to the nanny.
Yes, exactly.
If
it were truly upmarket.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Next up, then, because there's nothing for Adventure of the Christmas Pudding and so on that's not published in America, so that leads us to The Pale Horse.
The Pale Horse is a standalone novel that explores mysterious goings-on and unexplained deaths at a countryside inn from 1961.
Yeah, so this was, again, Ladies' Home Journal in April 1962.
And even looking at the cover, the big articles inside the exciting world of fashion and how to help adolescents understand sex. In 3 years, it feels like that's moved on from The Governor's Wife a little bit. Although there's still You're Never Too Old to Look Young, which can be true for any of us.
Yeah, I think what maintains, and it indeed is a common theme throughout all of these, is that there's a very particular niche of journalism that's directed towards women, which is very middle class. It's very based around childcare, supporting a household in terms of the emotional labour and in a wifely and maternal fashion. That it's, in a way, it's kind of a sobering reminder, because obviously when we talk about sex and gender in the 60s, like we did way back in episode 1, the temptation is to make it sound like everything was changing. But of course, sadly, the kind of housewifey myths still very much survived, held true.
Yes.
And these magazines are a bit of a testament to that.
Yes, things are still circling back to that. No matter where you go, it still comes back to, and as a wife and mother.
Yes. It's interesting that on the contents page, the little blurb about the Christie story very much plays down the spooky supernatural aspect to it, which is what most people who love that book love about the book now, and plays up the romance element. So it says, Miss Christie has been practicing the art of covering up, meaning covering up murders, for an unmentionable number of years. The Pale Horse is a mystery dashed with romance and introduces a new approach to doing away with, and doing away and with are capitalized, which is a new way of putting it. It's almost a Western, and by that I mean cowboy typeface that the Pale Horse has. Well, that's certainly the impression it gives me, with that sort of bolted on yellow, almost circus effect of the title in this one. And common with quite a few of these, the illustration doesn't look out of step with the sorts of covers that Tom Adams was designing famously for Christie.
Yeah, not the last time we'll mention him, because he's going to pop up again in a minute.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, and would you say it's standard that it seems to me that it's standard that there's one commissioned illustration at the start of the serialization, and then any visuals you see for the rest of the serialization are ads or cartoons or something. That's it in terms of the story.
That's absolutely, yes, the way that it goes.
Yeah.
Now we're going to skip over The Mirror Cracked, because that wasn't picked up for a serialisation by one of these major magazines because of issues about it perhaps not being great for their female readers, who perhaps aren't going to like aspects of the story, and also partly because some of the editors felt that it was a little too easy to solve. So that brings us on to The Clocks.
The Clocks is a Poirot novel about espionage and an unidentified body from 1963.
Yeah, so Cosmopolitan magazine this time in January 1964, so a few months after The Clocks was first published in the UK. And one of the most striking things I think about this edition, it's got, would you call them headlines of the articles that are included? Strap lines, yeah. They're stripped across the front in landscape, and they've all got different and quite a swinging font colour.
Yes.
Each line has got a different colour.
And they're very focused on popular culture. Our cover star is Richard Chamberlain, who is famous for many things, but for playing Dr. Kildare on television, who many years later came out as gay. And so the idea that he is, he's the dinner date for this one, and who needs a husband when you've got Dr. Kildare on TV? There are ways that we might want to unpack that, but perhaps not quite for this episode. But he was very much a sort of matinee idol. He was someone who, seemed to be the housewife's choice, I guess.
Yes. Well, yeah, he was their choice. It's just they were choosing incorrectly, shall we say. I mean, the other cover stars, of course, are the new Agatha Christie novel, which is stripped across the bottom. And just above that, it says Alfred Hitchcock's Blood Money.
Which is an interview about what does Alfred Hitchcock do with his blood money. In other words, he keeps killing people off. And but he doesn't do it that much.
I mean, the same could be said of Christie, I guess. They could have made it a combined article.
Yeah.
The clock's typeface is hot pink. It's the pink... Actually, the typeface that the clock's title is in, it's the pink of our podcast art, in fact. With a purple trim around it.
Yeah. This one has got an extra illustration sort of halfway through, but they're quite abstract. We've got the cats. We've got the orange cat. If you flip a few pages on. So...
oh, yeah! Oh, yes. Yeah, the fashionable scarf, which turned out to be not a scarf at all, but one of many cats.
Beautifully depicted on this.
Yeah, quite surrealist, this illustration style.
Yeah.
Which feels very of a piece with contemporary art at this period. Also, I like the byline before it begins. It says, clearly, it was a case for the world's most famous detective, Hercule Poirot. There were 3 murder victims, 4 mysterious clocks, and a frightened girl who obviously wasn't telling everything she knew. I mean, more if you squint and take out the bit about the clocks, it's kind of a description of Third Girl, and it's very much written in quite a pulpy way, in the way that the Collins blurbs are not written at this time. You know,
no. I think the only other illustration in this is a slightly almost fetishistic picture of a leg with the high heel snapping, but you can see the top of the stocking in the leg as well. It's
I haven't seen this.
Yeah, that's a few pages on.
Oh yeah.
So it's like a lovely outline of a single leg with a snap.
That's very striking, isn't it? Right in the
is.
middle of the page. Yeah, because as we say, often it's just ads, or it's at best it's a satirical cartoon about something completely different.
Yes.
Which is one of the things we were really struck by is how we know that people's eyes, readers' eyes, were darting from Miss Martindale or from Tuppence Bereford to this other content, and how might that influence their perception of the story.
A Caribbean mystery, again, not in one of these big magazines, partly because of time pressure, but also because I think this is one of the ones where I remember somebody saying, one of the correspondents, I really liked it, and I just can't convince my editor to pick it up.
Right.
So
that's a shame.
this still wasn't poorly received by any means. It just, sometimes you get unlucky. So no A Caribbean mystery for this sort
I guess
of
it
thing.
depends on the timing as well and what else they have coming in.
This is often so often the thing, and there are a few where they go, we've got another mystery serial going at this point, so we don't want this one as well.
Yeah.
So that means our next one is Bertram's Hotel.
At Bertram's Hotel is a Miss Marple novel set in a London hotel, which is not quite what it seems, from 1965.
In Good Housekeeping
Yeah,
in the US.
maybe there was a perception that, it's wrong, but maybe there was a perception that Caribbean mystery was slightly below par, and indeed the clocks too, because this headline on Good Housekeeping is Agatha Christie, her best new novel in years.
Yes. The most frustrating thing about this cover, which has got a sort of blonde model on
narrow it down. Half of them have got a beautiful blonde model on them.
But the really frustrating thing is that it's got an interview with Julie Andrews, which they called All the Things I Love Most, rather than My Favourite Things. Can you believe they didn't call it My Favourite Things? The other sort of things that we've got in this issue then, apart from Julie Andrews, lots of beauty chic, upholstered furniture, My Problem, Stubborn Husband. All sorts of Keep Up with Medicine, Every Day is Mother's Day, and there's a shocking shortage of nurses, and some of the nicest people are superstitious. So I think it'd be fair to say a very diverse range of articles that we get in Good Housekeeping.
It's funny, it's no wonder then that the Christie stories keep getting billed and tweaked slightly towards the romantic space when so much of these magazines' page time is turned over to matters of marriage and courting and all sorts. We've got it again. There's this lovely blurb just before Bertram's Hotel begins. It says 3 great names, great is underlined, Daphne du Maurier. Oh, we should do a bonus episode about Daphne
Oh
du
my
Maurier.
goodness, yes, that's such an obvious one.
Daphne du Maurier, Mary Stuart, and Agatha Christie lead the list of best-selling romantic suspense writers throughout the whole world. Now, with this appearance of Agatha Christie to round out the trio, all have graced the pages of Good Housekeeping in the past year. Here is Miss Christie's newest novel, her best and most exciting in 20 years, apparently, featuring that ever-delightful and winning detective, Miss Jane Marple. And then there's a huge illustrations of key number 18 and then in Times New Roman at Bertram's Hotel by Agatha Christie.
Which is very similar, if not the same, but slightly more stylized. The first edition in the US used that image as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's a slightly stylized version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The illustration over the page of the kind of Bertram's drawing room or grand, dining room area is beautiful.
Yeah, it's a bit brown, but that would be accurate. There's a lot of brown in it.
There's a splash of orange.
Yeah.
And Miss Marple is a splash of pink as well.
So this is the one that's actually split over 2 issues. So the next issue's got 20 new hairdos to make you prettier than ever. Marina Oswald.
You look directly at me when you said that.
I did. Well, Marina Oswald and Marie Tippett, the forgotten widows of the Kennedy tragedy. The Kennedys pop up a lot on these covers.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But also the birth control method that may replace the pill. So actually, I was thinking when I was looking at the previous issue that Good Housekeeping felt very safe, a little bit old-fashioned. But hey, look, they're talking about the pill on their front cover. So all power to them.
Yeah, mind you, I mean, they have had 6 years to get their head around the concept of the pill since it was first introduced to a very limited number of women in certain situations at the start of the decade in 1960.
And there's another nice illustration here with a quite scary Miss Marple in the background, doing more than just eavesdropping. She's staring daggers, but
yes. at what looks like a romantic couple. Is that supposed to be Bess Sedgwick and... She's wearing a slip-like dress.
Yeah,
so.
maybe she is, yeah. So it's nice that they're giving these stories proper prominence still and giving them the sort of gold star treatment, really.
Yeah. Again, emphasising the romantic angle there, though.
Yes, which is such a common thing.
Yeah. The illustration caption, Miss Marple was worried no young girl with money should love a man of that sort.
Oh.
Which I actually don't think is the message of the novel at all. But again, it's being packaged. It's like how journalists will read headlines of articles they've written and gone, well, I didn't write that. And it's kind of the splashy ephemera around, the paratext around the actual thing that appears in the paper or whatever it may be.
Yes. It reminds me, because there's quite a lot of, especially in the earlier decades, the moving finger. I remember there being a big thing about, well, we've got to emphasise the romantic couple. So there's so many pictures of like budding romance, but none of Miss Marple in the not that she's in it very much, but still.
Well, that's another point, actually, which is that these are billed as stories of Poirot and Miss Marple, and maybe the abridgments do overemphasise their aspects, but a common complaint of books like, well, in particular, I'm thinking Cat Among the Pigeons and The Clocks, is that Poirot's not actually in it much.
Yeah.
But again, that's the way they're being marketed to these magazines' readers. And then, so Third Girl appears in Red Book.
Third Girl is a Poirot novel set in swinging London about a young woman who thinks she may have committed a murder from 1966.
In April 1967?
Which had published quite a few Agatha Christie's
I've
way
never
back
heard
to
of
at
Red
least...
Book.
Yeah, I wasn't that familiar with it until I think Collecting Christie did an article about them a while ago, but Why Didn't They Ask Evans, I remember doing. The first book publication is actually a special Red Book of Why Didn't They Ask Evans. So, but this time, it's, as you say, Third Girl.
Oh my God. So the top headline in this edition of Red Book is "The Innocent Game That Disrupts Marriages." Is that talking about swingers?
I don't think it is. I wish I had it. I've got it at home. We are obviously in America, so I do have this.
You mean you
copy
didn't
at home
bring it
as
with
well.
you?
Didn't bring it with me, and we've only photographed a few relevant pages. But I remember thinking it might be swinging, and actually I don't think it was. I think it was something else. So
Damnation.
Yes.
Well, I'm sorry. It's actually The Third Girl. that appears in this magazine.
It is.
That's in the contents page and indeed on the first page of it. It
Yes.
doesn't appear to be an illustration.
No illustration. Redbook didn't really do illustrations very much. They were
cheap.
very much about the text of the articles and the. So you'd buy this for the articles. You see, that's what you do.
Like Playboy.
Exactly. Yes.
And then Endless Night.
Endless Night is a standalone psychological thriller in which young couple Michael and Ellie are menaced by unusual happenings from 1967.
Was taken up for serialization in the Saturday Evening Post in 1968, and this is another split across 2 issues.
Yes, and
I mean it's too good to abridge too heavily.
absolutely.
I would argue.
Another publication that's had decades of association with Agatha Christie, and in our Swinging Christie's era, this is where our Tom Adams comes in, being a little bit more surreal than because the owl.
Whereas normally he's so straightforward.
But I mean, look at the way that he uses colours and that hands and the people on that.
It's very much very classic him, but it's different because the owl illustration, we'll post this on our socials, but the owl illustration is almost photorealistic, whereas the hand is very, very much illustrated.
Exactly.
And then the traveller figure is set back. It's very layered as well, and then the trees behind her, and
there's a lovely depiction of the house, which I really like, a few pages in. Or right at the beginning, actually, in the end is my beginning.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Which is really nice. And not a million miles away from the version of the house we see in the film.
Very, very true.
Just with a few more curves added to the front, really.
Yeah. The sort of the blocky side of it that's incomplete looks a little more like the house in that film.
It does, yeah.
So a nice mixture of colour and black and white illustrations as well.
Yeah, typically gruesome images of... Oh, well, I don't even quite know what that was, but vegetation overtaking a dead body there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
that's for part 2.
Yes. Well, elsewhere in these issues, we've got Paul Newman about directing his first movie. And then in the second part of it, it's Kennedy's again. This is the thing about a funny and fascinating look into the future. So the idea of Bobby Kennedy being sworn in as the acting president. So Kennedy's. You're not escaping them in this era.
Did you do that deliberately?
No.
Because the famous jingle.
Kennedy. Yeah.
Kennedy for me. That was 1960.
Well, there you go. It is
So
clearly
obviously lodged in your brain somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is particularly kind of galling and timely and strange to look at for all sorts of reasons, because this is just a few months before Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah.
And there was something of a target on his back because people who didn't side with the Kennedys were concerned that this could happen. Again, we said in our New York episode how Dorothy Olding and Agatha Christie's lives were sort of intersecting with current affairs in terms of the Kennedys, and here it is again. And I've said this many times, but there's a really interesting Jackie Kennedy reference in Halloween Party as well, which is the following year. So yeah. And then this one we spent quite some time with. This is the periodical publication of By the Pricking of My Thumbs.
Yes.
By the Pricking of My Thumbs sees Tommy and Tuppence return to investigate a mystery at a nursing home from 1968.
In Cosmopolitan in July 1969.
With a woman in a bikini on the cover, no doubt emulating Afternoon at the Seaside.
Oh, I think it's a direct reference. It's a great photo, actually, because there's a green background and then the bikini is green.
Yeah. The mystery novel is smashing. Agatha's new mystery novel is smashing.
I would agree with that. In terms of the contents of the magazine, besides Agatha Christie,
we've got everything from 38 Men Tell a Nice Girl Like You What Turns Them On, to how to have rich girl hair, what it's like to have a Latin lover before you buy a stereo, and then, there are lots of handbrake turns here into a fiction feast.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've just realised that I thought it was what it's like to have a Latin lover before you buy a stereo. That's why I laughed. Oh. You didn't pause between the two. It's what it's like to have a Latin lover and also
before you
an article about buying a stereo.
Oh,
I thought it was like The best way to have a Latin love, the best thing to do
The best
with a Latin
stereos
lover
for Latin
is
lovers.
is to dance around. I see now.
Now, as for By the Pricking of My Thumbs itself, it's a very creepy, and I've got to say, not terribly inviting sort of pencil drawing that brings you into its condensed version of the story.
I mean, again, it could be, it isn't, but it could be a Tom Adams, couldn't it? It's
Yes.
very much of that style.
Yes, it's not one of the better illustrations that I've seen, I have to say. But we'll put it on our social media anyway, so you can judge for yourself and tell me if I'm wrong.
And I noted that the abridged novel comes pretty much at the end of the magazine. There's the Agony Aunt column, Dear Cosmopolitan, and an ad, and then you're right at the end of the magazine. And you said it was fairly common that they would be at the culmination of the magazine, or sometimes they'd have the first few pages early on and then turn to page blah, blah, blah to finish?
Exactly, yeah, that's exactly what might happen. So it really depended on the magazine and the era, but they were obviously trying to get you to get as far into the magazine as possible to read as many adverts as possible.
Sure.
So they would split them up quite often or put the juiciest stuff at the end, having been trailed right at the beginning.
Yeah, adverts that included 2 separate tampon companies, I noted. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was interesting. I was looking at the politics around the Abortion Act being passed in the UK the year before By the Pricking of My Thumbs was published, and the various kind of politics around the culprit of this story and what motivates her. And I think it's a much more nuanced conversation than maybe people have given it credit for in the past, and I'm sure the research that I've done around that will be finding an outlet very soon. But I did note that those passages where Tuppence, at the end, where Tuppence demonstrates a real sympathy and understanding for what women go through, frankly, were kept intact in this abridgment, which I wouldn't have been 100% surprised if those have been cut just around reader sensibilities, given the sort of politics of some of the things they're talking about. Like we said, very housewife focus, quite nuclear family, quite establishment oriented. But yeah, in many ways, that's quite a daring and radical story. So it's great to see it in a mainstream magazine.
And then our last one, because Passengers to Frankfurt isn't serialised and indeed wasn't offered, really.
Rudely.
There are a couple of...
Rudely?
Well, yes, that's another story. It's Cosmopolitan again, 1969, Halloween Party.
Halloween Party is a Poirot mystery novel in which a girl is drowned while apple bobbing from 1969.
Now, I think this cover...
Again, missing actual Halloween because it was published in December, just like the original publication.
I think this cover, which has got gorgeous gold and black and fantastic styling, I think you could put that on the newsstands and you wouldn't notice that it was from the 60s. I think it's a really timeless image. You're looking at me like I'm crazy. I really think that is a timeless cover. They tidied up their font for the masthead for Cosmopolitan, so it looks nice and clean and modern. I think it looks great.
It looks great. I do think it's very of its time, though. I mean, I think her styling and her makeup is not... You wouldn't see that kind of aesthetic now. I do love the glitter ball earring.
Yeah, I was saying to James, my partner, that it feels to me like actually something that I might see in like 2005 or something, that just when things were a bit sort of trying to be a bit glam, and you would add a little quirk.
Tess Daly's opening press look for the first season of Strictly Come Dancing. Yeah, maybe that.
So another nice range of articles. How to be his last wife when you're not his first. The woman who is making Jacqueline Onassis jealous. So here's Jackie Kennedy again.
And alongside Halloween Party. Perfect.
Alongside Halloween Party. Homosexual man can be habit forming. One girl's story. We're going to go on to that in a moment because I can't skip over that. Jobs for bored, restless young housewives. Raquel Welch. I'm not saying Raquel Welch is a bored, restless housewife.
This is what I mean. You're not pausing sufficiently between them.
Pause. A Cosmo Girl Christmas. Beauty, food, decorating, all to a man's taste, and then finally Agatha Christie's latest thriller.
Yeah, and a full profile on Patrick McGoohan.
Yes, very 60s,
famously
just off the back of The Prisoner and Danger Man before that, in which he's extremely grumpy, but the interviewer is clearly in love with him anyway. So that's interesting. And then...
Why? Is that because the interviewer was moving on to the next topic, homosexual man, how I kicked the habit.
Oh my goodness. This is extraordinary. So this is basically an entire article about saying don't hang around with gay men, but also the real caution about that blatant homosexuals, it seems, are fine. He's a familiar enough commodity to any girl who's out and about, apparently. But it's the ones who actually pass and are not as if they're heterosexual, which this article incredibly categorises as bisexual. And you're like, no, that's not what it means. So they are saying that straight acting, and I'm using quotation air quotes here, gay men are apparently bisexual. So it's basically saying, be careful of your men because they might not be obviously homosexual. So there's a cautionary tale for us all.
Speaking of
Speaking of
a tinge of homoeroticism, I can't help but think of the conversation about the aesthetics of beauty that Michael and Hercule Poirot have in the Quarry Garden in Halloween Party, which is just a few pages on, an Hercule Poirot mystery Halloween Party. And the illustration does depict said garden with the nymph-like Miranda at the heart of it, rather than the Adonis Michael, which is a shame, really.
Yeah.
But
interrupted only by an advert for 3 full inches added to her bust line in only 8 weeks. It happened to me, apparently. So there you go.
Good Lord. Yes. I've just turned the page and seen, so Michael is in the illustration also painting Miranda.
Yes,
and then
he
there's
is.
sort of mythical creatures and mate. Is that supposed to be Poirot behind him?
Oh, I guess it is.
He's very young.
He's very young. He's very dapper.
I mean,
you'd expect him to be dapper, I suppose, but 60s dapper.
Yeah.
Nice striped tie. Would never imagine Poirot in a traditional
No,
tie.
it's sort of Poirot reimagined as a young former Etonian a little bit, isn't it?
So yes, so that's it. So those are our main magazine American publications of our swinging era. And I just love the idea that somebody would be going and reading about, how to keep your man, or, what contraception's available, or the latest scandal of the Kennedys, and then go straight and read one of Agatha Christie's stories, and they be presented together. And this idea of Agatha Christie being old-fashioned, again, we're talking cosmopolitan here.
Yeah.
She isn't seen as an old fuddy-duddy who nobody wants to think is swinging.
Yeah.
She is absolutely
standing shoulder to shoulder with these incredibly modern aesthetics and subject matters. Yeah. Absolutely. It struck me that it's an easy criticism to level at Christie sometimes, and one that a lot of diehard fans do. Things like, that love plot is shoehorned in there, or but she always uses romance or divorce or marriage or whatever it is as a motive. She goes to that well too often. Or things like, she wrapped that up too neatly with a bow and I could have left with some things unanswered. Or even the overuse of Poirot and Marple. All of these things are things that made these stories incredibly attractive to, as you said at the beginning, the lucrative periodical market. All of these things, this isn't Christie resting on her laurels. It's her being savvy about what readers want, actually, and that is, how she was able to be so successful and to write so much and publish so much. So, it helps us understand her even better, I think.
I think so too. So the time has come, Gray, for us to wave goodbye to our second American city of this trip.
Yes.
So Washington DC. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
We've had a lovely sunny few days.
We have.
Very, very
We've been very lucky.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for the train back. It's all very organised, which I think we both appreciate.
Yes.
Just how
sort of. Yes. I like a display. I like something to be telling me when and where I need to be.
Yeah,
a comfortable waiting area,
Yes.
designated waiting spot,
Yes.
reserved seats.
Huge amounts of open spaces that could quite easily accommodate lots of seating. They clearly don't want it to. But let's not delve too deeply into the politics behind that, dear listener.
Well, yes, maybe now is the moment to give our disclaimer that these episodes are in no way supposed to be seen as an endorsement of anything that's going on in America right now.
Absolutely.
But
we booked these tickets a long time ago.
we did, and planned the trip. But it's nice to, everyone we've met has been absolutely lovely, and it's important to remember that whatever's going on.
Who thought that I was gonna dine and dash.
Yeah,
and
you do
followed
have that
me
look
to the
about you though.
bathroom.
We went to the same place today, and they were a little unsure about this. A different server was a little unsure about your credentials again.
Do you want the check?
Yeah. Do you want the check? Do you want? No, it was emphasis on want. Like, do you want the check, or are you planning on running?
Yeah. So I had to get security. Yeah.
We spent our last morning in DC at the National
African American Museum, History Museum,
Yeah.
the Smithsonian, which last time I was here was still being constructed. The building was here, but it wasn't open yet.
Right.
And I was like, wow, what an amazing building.
It's beautiful.
And it is still beautiful and so good inside. as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Really, really like that.
It was really
I loved it
fascinating.
didn't pull its punches. No, actually, just about everybody was complicit in this.
Yeah,
If you're
it was a
white and in America.
proper holistic approach at all of the history.
Britain, indeed.
Across different eras and various different exhibitions as well. One thing in particular that I noticed, and it's a nice reminder from our perspective, there was a particular section on 1960s, and it's good for us to remember, of course, that this is all going on alongside Christie writing. And I also noticed that the first meeting, there was an exhibit that made the point that before this period, museums, particularly in America, were very much from the white perspective, and any kind of black artifacts were very much privately held or lost, because the priority wasn't there. And do you know what year the first meeting where they sort of said, like, no, actually, we need to start acknowledging African American history?
I dread to say.
Well, it was 1969, so it's in the period we're talking about.
Right.
So, which is another reminder. I mean, obviously, fairly recent comparatively, but it is another reminder that, when we talk all the time about the 60s, and it really was an important decade, and it really did lay the foundation for us today being in an African American museum. I mean, that the ball started rolling in 1969.
Yeah, it was really well constructed. Highly recommend. I think the one that we've enjoyed the most, or found most interesting. I enjoyed because there's real levels to it, where you can enjoy learning about things but still have a real personal impact.
Like the music exhibition, which neglected to include Diana Ross.
Diana Ross, couldn't believe we both came out because we sort of wandered around it separately, and when we met up at the end, I said, "Did I miss Diana Ross?" He said, "I was going to ask you that." Yeah. So yes.
And next episode, the American theme continues, although in a slightly different way, because it's our Shirley Jackson special dropping in about a month's time. So stay tuned and keep subscribed.
Yes, and keep swinging. Indeed.
Got lots of plans, lots more goodies on the way.
Very exciting things already recorded and ready to go. Indeed. So obviously you can get in touch with us. You can follow us in all sorts of different ways. Maybe not in person, but online. There's lots of ways to follow us.
In various legal ways.
In various legal and yes, required ways, requested ways. You can find us on Instagram at Christie_time. Our Blue Sky is christietime.bsky.social. You can email us at christietimeprod@gmail.com. That's prod for productions. Our website is christietime.com. You can find Gray's website at grayrobertbrown.wixsite.com/GrayRobertBrown. Find me at Instagram at Dr. Mark Aldridge, and on Blue Sky, markaldridge.info, which is also my website URL. And of course, my books about Agatha Christie are available now. So if you haven't picked it up by now, I think it's a lost cause. If you haven't picked it up by now, actually, but still, maybe treat yourself. If you get a book voucher from your gran. Yeah.
Well, this is also maybe a lost cause, because I said till I'm blue in the face, but please, if you haven't already, do consider rating and reviewing us wherever you get your podcast, because it makes such a difference, gaming algorithms and spreading the word, and we really do appreciate it. We read every comment and reply to everything. We read every email, so do get in touch and keep swinging.
Keep swinging.
Thanks for listening, my little stars and stripes. The Swinging Christies is a Christie Time project by Dr. Mark Aldridge and Gray Robert Brown. This episode was recorded between the 24th and 26th of May 2025. Our artwork was designed by Bartlett Studio, and our music is by Dar Golan.
Perfect levels there. Graham, maximum yawn, please. Can you work one out?
Work one out?
Work one out. Another big yawn.
I'm not sure if we have a coda for this episode.
You'll find one.